Hi guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Morgan. So I want to kind of let you guys know the 16 books I have recently read. I haven't made like a wrap-up video in months, so I thought I could just kind of mash up all the books that I read in the last 4 months into one video, which is not too many. It's just 16. And the first one that I read in April was Yellowface. So you guys can go ahead and check out my reading vlog of Yellowface. I gave this book, I think I gave this book 4 stars, and then like a week later I found myself continuing to like think about it and think about the character and the story in this world, and because it like kind of stayed in my brain, I realized that it was truly a 5-star read. So I ended up changing it to 5 stars. I still stand by that rating. This book was magnificent. I was very nervous about going into this book because I feel like I'm a very anxious person, so a lot of times when I read books or watch TV and like the plot is very like, you know, is she gonna get caught, like those kind of vibes, I always get very nervous, and like I find myself not wanting to watch or like read that kind of media because it genuinely gets my anxiety going. But for some reason this was like really entertaining and creepy and weird and crazy and just so like, oh, it was just such an interesting read. Oh my god, I just love this book. Like I genuinely love this book. I read this on my Kindle, and then after I read it on my Kindle I had to buy it, so I went ahead and purchased it. If you guys don't know, this is a book about a writer. Her name is June. I'm pretty sure her name is June. And she is friends with another writer whose name is Athena. Her friend Athena is like, you know, renowned highly in the book world. She's got Netflix deals with her books, and her main character's career is kind of not doing well. And so her friend ultimately passes away, and our main character steals her dead friend's manuscript, which is a book that's like not finished being written. It's like a draft. So she steals her dead friend's, you know, draft of her book and finishes writing it and then sells it as her own. And it's this crazy story of like, you know, is she going to get caught? Are people going to believe she wrote this? How can she live with herself after doing this? It's so good, guys. And it's crazy because I've watched so many like reviews, people like bashing it, and I just don't really understand the bash. I think it's so cool. I'm obsessed. So that was Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. Next book I read was called The Space Between Worlds. This book is by, I don't know how to say that. Is that Micaiah Johnson? This book's gorgeous. I actually bought this book at a used bookstore, and it was like a new book they had just acquired, and it was brand new, babe. So it was so gorgeous that I had to purchase it. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I didn't really love this book. I'm trying to think. I think it just felt kind of slow for me. If I'm not mistaken, I think this is a book series. Is this a book series? I feel like it is. If it's not, then that's my fault. Yeah. Okay, so this is supposed to be the first book in a series. The second book it came out this year. So this is a book about our character who is living in like the, I guess you call it like dystopian, you know, sci-fi world where traveling through different dimensions is possible. So the multiverse is like a real thing. And it's kind of hard to follow, to be honest with you, but if you're really into sci-fi, then I do think you would enjoy this. I wouldn't say this is a bad book at all. I mean, I gave it 3 stars. It's not a horrible rating. It just didn't really do it for me. I think the first half of this book was stronger than the second half because, you know, you're getting it set up and you're finding out all these interesting facts and all these cool things that, you know, our author's just making up, and it's just so interesting. And like I said, I just enjoyed the first half more because I think when we got deeper into the plot, it kind of just lost me and it didn't really go the way I wanted it to. So I will not be continuing this series. I gave it 3 stars, but I still think it is so stinking cute. Next book I read was, oh, Carrie SoDo is back. So that is by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read that on my Kindle. Ooh, don't get stuck. But yeah, I read that on my Kindle. And I pretty sure I gave that 4 stars. Like I said, it's literally been months. Yeah, I gave that book 4 stars. So I am a sucker for Taylor Jenkins Reid. I just love her writing style. Just like, she can just do no wrong. Like, even if there is one book that I like kind of softly DNF'd it, but it wasn't because it was bad. I just wasn't in the mood to read that particular storyline. But in general, all the books that I picked up from her are solid books, and this was no different. I mean, this is a really interesting book about tennis, and I actually read this book after watching Challengers. It kind of got me in the vibes. Did I watch it after Challengers or before? Oh my god, I can't even think right now. But it was like in the midst of Challengers, whether that was when the trailer came out, or the movie, I don't know. But anyways, this is a book about our main character, Carrie, and she is like, you know, the best tennis player or whatever, best like female tennis player. So she ends up retiring, and then some young girl ends up breaking one of her records, and she decides to come out of retirement to try to beat her record. And it's such an interesting book. Oh, I just loved it so much. I think my favorite thing about the book was just like the character development with our main character, Carrie, because her like personality is just highly competitive. You know, she's the best. This is all that matters. If I can't have this, then what is my life worth? And I think that can be so destructive as a person, to put your self-value and your self-worth into one thing. Like, it's not a healthy thing for a person to do. And just the way that she was able to kind of capitulate that, and then go through with some really sad things in the book, and then by the end kind of come out like a completely evolved person, was like really, really awesome. And I think the book was honestly more, I feel like the purpose of it was definitely more towards like character evolution than tennis, which I think it was a cool way to like show that through athletics. So I enjoyed myself, gave it 4 stars. I did cry. It was just really good. I really enjoyed it. Next book I read was actually 2, was the first 2 sagas, which is like a comic book series. I'm not gonna talk about that too much, but I don't know, I really enjoy it. I think I've read like 5 now, but I read the first 2. It's like sci-fi fantasy, and like I said, it's a comic book, and it's about these 2 people who are from like different worlds or different species, and they fall in love, and their love is like a forbidden romance. Like, these 2 species are like in a war fighting each other, but they end up falling in love, and of course falling in love with the enemy is illegal. It's treason. So this book is about them kind of being on the run, and they're like both being hunted by kind of everyone, and they ended up having a child together, and the whole family is just being hunted. And it's a really crazy, cool, fast-paced comic book that I would recommend to really anyone who's like into fantasy and sci-fi. Definitely trigger warnings, because it's a lot of gore, a lot of sex, and with it being a comic book, there's a lot of drawings of a lot of crazy things, so be wary. The next thing I read was Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I think I read this like half on Kindle and then half an audiobook. It's interesting because this book kept popping up for me to like read, like Goodreads and just like different apps were telling me that I would enjoy this based on my previous reading. And so I was like, whatever, I'll give it a try. I think this is like not a popular take, but I hated this book. Like, I really hated it. And it just did not do anything for me. Like, it did nothing for me at all. All of it was boring. All of it was just like, why should I care? I don't know. Like, when I saw reviews about this book, everyone's like, oh, it's so crazy. It's so amazing. It's transformative. And I just didn't feel that way at all. This book is like a exploration of like friendships, and we follow several different characters, but of course the head of it is a octopus who can communicate. I don't know. Look, it just wasn't good. I gave it 2 stars. I don't really care to think about it ever again, and I wouldn't recommend it. So that's just my take on it. Next book I read was The Naturals. I read the first book in that series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I actually really enjoyed that book as well. I also have a reading vlog for that. The first book was so interesting because me personally, I'm a sucker for Criminal Minds. I absolutely adore that show, and the book is definitely sold to you as like a Criminal Minds, but with like teenagers. And so I was definitely wary to like read the book because I have kind of taken a few steps back when it comes to YA because I've just found that I've not really enjoyed it of recently. I just like more mature themes. I just feel like YA, they can only do so much when it comes to that. And writing style in general, like I just like more mature writing. But I actually enjoyed that book. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It had me on the edge of my seat. I think I read it in like 3 days. So like super fast paced. Also read that on my Kindle. Next book I read was Jade War by Fonda Lee. That book, I think I just listened to that completely on audiobook. Second book in Jade City. You know, it's kind of interesting because first of all, those books are incredibly long, like incredibly long. So for me, audiobook was just like my go-to of like, I don't really want to be reading this for like 20 hours. I'd rather just listen to it. I did enjoy it. I'm just not really sure if that the book type is like my favorite. You know what I mean? Like when I think of fantasy, I don't think of the type of fantasy that we have in Jade City. But I do think it's cool because it is very, very different. So I think that's like a positive and negative depending on how you want to look at it. But like face value of the book and the writing and the character tropes, they're all great. Like this author knows how to write. And so if you're into like super, I think they call this urban fantasy. It's almost like, I think one of the quibs, the things on the page was like The Godfather, but like with magic. It was something weird like that. But like I can definitely see that because we're kind of following a family, and that family has a I guess the simplest term is like a gang. Like it's almost like a kingdom. Like they got their own like thing and higher up criminal faction. I don't know what to call it. That's kind of the vibes. And they have this gem. It's called Jade, and if you are of certain heritage, then you can like utilize that jade and you can use its power. So that's pretty cool. I do recommend it. I think I ended up giving Jade War 4 stars. Next, I read The Notebook. I listened to that on audiobook. It was okay. It was okay. I have still never seen the movie. I do want to. I just haven't done it yet. I will say that I don't really know how big of a fan I am on like the differing of timelines. Like I'm not a big fan of like present time and then, you know, 20 years later and then we're going back and forth. I just don't love that. I just don't love it. And even if the plot is good, that can definitely like take down my enjoyment of a book. And that's what The Notebook did for me. It didn't really get me. Also, when you're reading a book like that, and even though I haven't seen the movie, I mean, it's kind of impossible not to be spoiled on some things that happen in it. And so it was kind of obvious that they were going to, of course, that she was going to choose him. It's kind of obvious. Spoiler alert. And he was okay. I think I gave it 3 stars. It was a fast book, so that's cool. Next, I read The Lost Apothecary by, what is her name? The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Pinner. So this is a historical fiction book. We're following 3 different characters, also differing timelines, which like I said, I don't love that. And I didn't love this book. I ended up giving it 3 stars. This book is about, we have one character who's like living in the 1700s, and she has a apothecary, which is like a shop with like not trinkets. It's a shop with like potions. But her shop is a little bit different because she has potions and like remedies, but she also has poisons. So women will like come into her shop and be like, hey, I want to kill X, Y, and Z. Can you give me something for that? And so she sells poisons to these women to help them out. And we have another We have another character who is from a different timeline. She's in the present, so she's in like the, you know, 2020s. And so she is like a historical lady, and she like finds the actual apothecary, and it's kind of her deep dive into the history of that. And yeah, I wouldn't recommend it, but I read it, gave it 3 stars. Next book is the next saga. That was number 3. And then after that, I read Killer Instinct, which is the second book in the Natural series. I liked that one a little bit less, and I think that's kind of how I feel about YA in general. Like, when it comes to reading, like a book franchise, when it comes to YA, like, you know, maybe the first book, you can get me. You can, like, you know, throw a twist I won't see coming. But I feel like once I get an author's, like, formula down, it's not that exciting for me anymore. And so the second book definitely fell flat, but I'm not really sure if that was the author's fault or it's because I'm just way too intuitive and I just guessed it, you know? There is like a love interest, kind of love triangle situation going on in this franchise, and at least at the end of book 2, what I wanted to happen happened. So that made me happy. That was cool. Next book I read was Untamed by Glennon Doyle. This is this the first nonfiction book I read all year? It might be. It might just be the first nonfiction book I read this year. Yeah. So this book is kind of an exploration on our author's life. I listened to this on audio, and then I ended up getting the Kindle book as well because there's so many amazing quotes in that book that I just needed to have them forever. So I went ahead and got the Kindle version so I could highlight some really cool things that she was pointing out. And this book was, honestly, I will say this is a book that I will recommend to you guys if you are down to read a memoir, women's fiction. She really focuses on the aspect of her life, and I also have a video about this book. So this book, let me think, how do I capitulate this in a way that sounds right? So I would say that in this book, the author, she kind of talks about her life and how growing up she always felt like she had to be a people pleaser, and she never felt in control of her life. And she this is like her way of like breaking those bonds and becoming her own person and becoming somebody who respects herself, who does what she wants to do, who loves who she wants to love. And in the beginning of this book, like, she's married and she has this family and this, that, and the other. And throughout this book, she just starts saying, like, I don't actually, you know, I'm not actually enjoying my life. You know, this decision I made over long ago, I regret it. I don't, you know. And so she's kind of rebuilding her life. And it's great. I mean, it's a great book. I definitely recommend it a lot. Next book I read was book 5 on Saga. And then I read Notes on an Execution by Dania Kukowska. Maybe that's how you say it. I read that book, also the same video. And so this book was interesting. It was a book about a character who is a serial killer, and he kills women. And so we are kind of, throughout this book, we follow a lot of different POVs. All the POVs except the killer are female. So there's like 4 different like female characters, 3 or 4, and then him. And so it's kind of like you kind of get the whole picture of his life story, like through the eyes of women. So we get his childhood through the eyes of his mother. You know, we get him being a kid through the eyes of one of his, what did you call that? One of his like foster siblings. And then you get kind of his life through the eyes of another girl who knew him at a later time in life. So it's kind of very interesting. I didn't love this book, but I could definitely see how one could enjoy it. Like, there were definitely parts that were like interesting. It was pretty much like unlike any book that I had like previously read. You know, I don't pick up books that are kind of like that. Like, this book was like literary suspense thriller, and it was kind of genuinely like deconstructing the story of a serial killer. So it was kind of interesting. Gave that 3 stars. Now, the last book that I have officially read. We just started August, so we are in like the first week of August. And the last book that I have read that I wanted to just update you guys on was Just Last Night by Carrie McFarlane. This is a romance book. I listened to this on audio. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. And this book is about a woman who's in her mid-30s. A tragedy happens and she loses someone really close to her. And it's kind of an exploration of what she thought her life would look like and who she thought her friend was. And she ends up unpacking all these secrets and lies that, you know, were withheld to her. And she kind of begins to reconstruct her life. And it is like, there are times in the book where it's like really empowering. You know what I mean? So I can definitely see the like the target audience. I could definitely see who that is. And I thought it was pretty good. Like, it wasn't bad. It just wasn't like a book that I would bring up again. But yeah, gave that 3 stars. And those are the 16 books that I read in the past 4 months. Let me know down below if you guys have read any of these books and what you think about them. Maybe you'll pick some up, maybe you won't, I don't know. But yeah, now my mouth is dry. But I'll catch you guys later. Bye.